Thank you. You may be seated. Dr. Selebano, you're still under your previous oath.
Yes, yes, Justice.
Thank you. Advocate Nguchan.
Thank you, Justice Musaneke. In your last answer to the question, you had made reference to the fact that Dr. Manamela's team went there to inspect, to assess the NGOs, and in their view, the NGOs were suitable to take these patients. And you also offered that maybe a fit for purpose was not done during the implementation of the project. Do you still recall that?
Yeah, I recall that.
And in relation to the first one, whether assessment of this NGO pre-placement was done or not, it is clear from what we have heard, also from Dr. Manamela, that that was not done. There were no assessments of this NGO to determine their suitability. She had made mention to the fact that there are reports, but those reports do not exist. Are you aware of that?
That reports don't exist?
Yes, the pre-assessment reports of the suitability of these NGOs.
No, I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware of that. So you will accept it that patients were placed at this NGO prior to them being assessed whether they are suitable to cater for the needs of these patients or not.
My assumption would have been that they must have been assessed. Now that you are saying that, it means your answer is correct. Your question is correct.
Then, with that in mind, how does the fit for purpose feature in here? And what do you refer to by the fit for purpose?
In this instance, when I spoke about fit for purpose, I was saying, if you want an NGO which will treat, as an example, cerebral palsy, so then it means that type of NGO should also have the necessary facilities, the people who have an understanding of a cerebral palsy patient. You can't just put them in, as an example, a double story with people who do not have an experience of taking care of such patients. That's what, in summary, I meant by fit for purpose.
Yes. And from the NGOs which you had decided to close down, they were not fit for that purpose. They did not have these facilities.
I wouldn't say that. I closed them, like I said, that there was this pressure that we can't have patients demising.
Yes.
So do what you have to do to ensure that we minimize that or we actually stop that. So I was driven by that.
You are driven by that. And why specifically did you choose these particular NGOs for closure and not all of them?
Well, you would know that, I'm sure after that post facto, we know that most of, I should say, most of the patients who passed away were in that Pretoria, Tshwane area. I think that's what. But I didn't only do that. I also came, like I told you, to Sabadinga and Bokang, and also in Hammanskraal also.
And what were the problems, specific and peculiar problems related to these these NGOs which you closed?
You see, I can tell you, with the Precious Angels,
yes,
the reports we heard, and I heard, I'm sure you know them, that patients had passed away there. And when I went there, I was not going to discuss why, how, what. I was just there to say I'm moving the patients so that we don't have any other further deaths. They were not going to convince me otherwise to say, oh, it will not happen again. No, I was not interested in that. Similarly, in Bokang, even there were no patients who passed away. I was not interested. I just felt it's in an area. In those times, Justice, you are also scared that you don't want this thing to to continue. So you are driven by that also, to say, listen, I want to stop this thing as much as I can.
And with Bokang, you were not comfortable with the structures in place there.
Yeah, you mean Bokang here in
Yes.
Soweto?
Yes.
I just didn't like, and it's a subjective view.
Yes.
It's a subjective view. I just went there and just didn't like, you know, going. I was even thinking, if I'm a parent and I want to see my loved one, you got to go through and up and down. I said, it's not practical. So that's, for me, the assessment of whether was it good or not became immaterial. I said, also, other than that, we want to move them out. But even going there, it's a hassle. It's a hassle.
Yes.
Because it's in, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Justice, I think it's in a place called Snake Park. I think so, yeah.
In short, it was not fit for purpose.
Well, it would be all, if you use that concept for the family, it wouldn't be fit, because you know you don't want to catch a taxi, another taxi, and another taxi to go and see your loved one. You'd ideally want to go and save as much money as possible. That
Was
would
it
be.
fit for the purpose of looking after patients?
You mean Bakang now in this case,
Yes.
the one in Snake Park.
Yes.
Like I said, Justice, I went there, on the same day I went there. That's the same day I called EMS to remove them. So I didn't even want to hear that story, assess whether they have a menu, whether they've got food, what. I didn't want to hear that. I just went and said, we're moving the patients.
Yes. And let me refer you to page 21 of the record of your interview. And line 17, also on this issue. You say the newer ones were struggling. I will tell you what my impression is. When they were placed originally, it worked, but then I think the error came when they started upping the numbers on them. That is when the error started. We should not have upped the number, the pressure from below or from above. I do not want to say above or below. The newer ones were struggling. Can you explain what you refer to this?
Probably they were not coping with the patients.
No. As a matter of fact, you say that the newer ones were struggling. So give us the facts
But,
which underpins your conclusion there.
but that was my impression. And if you read it, I said, this is my impression.
What were the facts behind that conclusion?
No. But I hear you, except I want us to agree that I said this was my impression. I didn't have facts to say you are struggling because ABCD. I said this is my impression.
So would I be correct that they were not struggling?
I don't know why you'd say that. I'm saying here, I said they were struggling.
No. I want to understand why would you choose that word, they were struggling?
Spoken language. My impression, let me tell you what was my impression. My impression is that they were given 10, as an example, Justice. They were given 10, and then the numbers increased. So if you are given 10, and suddenly now you are at above 10, you would struggle. You struggle. That's the impression I had, and that's what I meant by that.
Let me help you. Then they will struggle in terms of feeding these patients.
Probably.
In terms of, what's your answer to that?
It's possible, yes.
They will struggle in terms of housing them properly. They will struggle in terms of clothing them, and so on and so on. Providing medication and providing an environment that is conducive for them to flourish. Will that be correct?
Well, you have mentioned a number of things that are not necessarily related. For instance, if you say they'll struggle to get medication, if you get a patient, you'll get with the medication. Yeah.
And they will struggle to look well after the patient, whether a particular patient needs attention, special attention or not. They will often miss those. Do you accept?
You are fair. It's fair.
It's fair. Okay. Then you go on, I think, in somewhere in the record, you made a reference to the fact that you were uncomfortable with the NGO. Let me be specific and take you to the specific passage. Page 41 of the record.
41. I don't have 41. I have 42 and 43. I don't have 41.
41 you don't have.
I don't have a 41 either.
You don't?
I don't have a 41, so I'm in the same position as you, doctor. Somehow they've copied a 40 and a 42 at the back.
At the
Okay. In this bundle, I have a 41 in this bundle now.
Oh, you have a 41 in that.
Yeah.
We found a 41.
Let me check if I don't have another 41.
You look luckier than me if you have a 41. Well, it's not a crisis. You go ahead. You
Yes.
read it into the record.
In line 21 on page 41, it says, Dr. Tiego Selebano, you see, the difficulty I sometimes have is that in other instances, in other NGOs, that for me, I was very uncomfortable. Nothing happened to those patients. So clearly, there were those NGOs, by the look of things, you were uncomfortable with their structures.
I'm sorry, I have 41 here, but I'm battling to find...
Line 21. There's a 20 on the left-hand side. Do you see?
My 21 says, like Takalane, for instance. That's what my 41 says.
That is not 41.
Well, it says 41 here.
Is it 41 at the top, middle of the page?
Page 41 at the top.
Yeah. No, I think we have different numberings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me read it into the record. You say, you see, the difficulty I sometimes have is that in other instances, in other NGOs, that for me, I was very uncomfortable. Did you hear that?
Yeah, go on.
Yes. And nothing happened to those patients. Why were you uncomfortable with this?
I think
NGOs.
in particular I was referring to Bakang. The one that I was saying was in Snake Park.
What specific features were troubling to you?
No, but I did explain that for me, when we talk about fit for purpose, I told you that going there was a hassle. We struggled ourselves to go there. And for me, I found it very, very unfair and uncomfortable. That's what I meant. Yeah. And then I said, and going there, and I was just relating in a discussion to say, and you know, you go there and nothing has happened to those patients, even though I moved them. That's what I...
That is the fit for purpose.
I don't know what you mean. Please
Okay.
explain.
I'm saying that you're saying that you struggle to reach this place,
Bakang,
and
yeah.
and that explains the fit for purpose you refer to.
Yeah, I did explain that for parents who want to see their loved ones, they're going to struggle.
Yes. Then let's close off this fit for purpose by a reference to Precious Angel. That is in your evidence as well. And it is on page 43, at the bottom of the page.
43. Okay.
And you say, Dr. Tiego Selebano, what we should have done was to be able to do a proper fit for purpose type of thing. You see that?
Yeah.
So you were not able at all to do a proper fit for purpose.
No, but read it, the whole sentence. What
When
we
we-
should
Yeah.
have done. was
Let
to
me,
be-
let me complete it. When we send to you, we will know what exactly you'll be able to deal with this.
Well-
Do you see that?
I see that, yeah.
So it's clear. It doesn't need an interpretation. That is, patience.
You can ask the witness, what does he mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
No. Here, you see, this is a discussion. We're seated here, and I'm saying, if you do a fit for purpose, these are the things that you should. That's why also you should have done. And in this particular instance, when I was talking to about Precious Angel, as you go on, you'll see. I said remember when I say we, there was no way that I could dissociate myself from the department. I can't.
Yes.
So I said, we. And I understood that we were unfair in that we didn't do that fit for purpose. We just kept on sending patients to them.
Yes.
And that was my also assessment that if we had done this properly thing, we should have done that and know that we can't send A to this and mix it with B, mix it with C. That was the essence of the discussion.
For example, I think give us a clear picture. But I don't follow you.
I'll give you an example again. If you have patients who are, I gave you an example, who are cerebral palsy,
Yes.
you wouldn't want a place where they've got to even traverse the stairs, a double or triple story place. You don't want that type of place. You would want a place where, because of their difficulty either in communication and difficulty in walking, you would want a place that will be fit for what you want to do. That's what I mean.
Did you know then what category of mental health care users were taken to Precious Angel?
No, I didn't know at all. I didn't know.
Did you know how many had been taken there?
No, I wouldn't have known, honestly. I wouldn't have known.
Did you know what prior check on fit for purpose had been done?
No, I wouldn't have known also.
So what does the statement on page 43, line 17 onwards mean then? What we should have done was to be able to do a proper feed for purpose type of thing. When we send to you, we will know that exactly you will be able to deal with this. Then later, with Precious Angels, we were unfair to Precious Angel. I'm saying it, and I'll always say it. Yes, we were unfair. The professor asks you, and you come back again, and you say, we were unfair. In what way, he asks you? You say in the sense that we sent too many different types of patients to Precious Angel. We should not have done that.
Yes.
If we wanted to send patients with intellectual disability, this is what we should have done only. And not send those who are demented and then mix with ... blank, because it is not helping them.
Okay.
Could you decipher that? Could you help me understand that?
What I was saying, when I said, remember, Justice, this is also hindsight. You must also remember it's hindsight. That then I got to learn what actually transpired. Because in all honesty, and I'm saying it again, Justice, it's not easy for any other HOD to know before. This is post facto. So when I learned what happened at Precious Angels, firstly, what I then knew was that the lady there was actually taking care of cerebral palsy children. So why would then we suddenly then want to give her adults? That was in this discussion.
You know she got a license. You know she got a license issued by Dr. Manamela.
Yes, I would think yes. She has a license. She said she has a license. I think
You know it authorized her to deal with patients. You say it yourself. which were unrelated to her core skills. You know that.
Yes, yes. That's what I'm saying here. If you read this, this is exactly what I'm saying.
Yes. And
Yeah.
you know that the numbers were way beyond what the facility could
Could
carry.
take, yes. This is, I knew that
Yes.
after, yes.
And you know that she didn't have the personnel to
And the
look after that class of patients.
Yes, I learned that also, yes.
And you know now that her home had levels which people on wheelchairs and
Couldn't.
immobile patients couldn't negotiate. You know that now.
That's the Denville one, yes,
Yes,
I remember
yes.
that one, yes.
And now you know many mental health care users died in her hands.
Yeah, they demised.
That must surely be proof in the eating of the pudding. Patients were there with all of these defects I've just described to you, and they lost their lives.
lives.
That you know now.
Now I know.
Yeah. Continue, Councillor.
Yes. Now, with these admissions, Dr. Selebano, let me refer you to another aspect related to this as well. I think that came up quite clearly from your interview. On page 44, at the bottom, line 23. 44, are you there?
Yeah.
And under your name, so that is what we did. We sent some chronic ambulatory patients, we send some elderly patients, then we send those who are in distinct. Once you do that, you set up that person for failure, and unknowingly, you see, Professor, the other problem, and that is what I have said to Dr. Manamela and all of us, that the lesson that I have learned out of this is that out there, because of the socio-economic conditions, it becomes a numbers game. What is this numbers game? Or let me refer you further down. You say, then Professor Makhoba says, yeah, and you respond, the more patients I get, the more subsidy I get, and the better off I become.
That's what the numbers game meant. That people would take more than they can chew, so that they can get more subsidy. That's what I meant.
And this is what occurred.
By and large, with Precious Angel, I wouldn't want to say with others. By and large, with Precious Angel, that's what I suspect happened.
Is it a suspicion or a reasonable inference
It will be a
from
reasonable.
the facts?
It would be a reasonable inference. I just used the common language.
Yes.
And then you go on and say, in line 10, Professor Makhoba, yes. Then you say, and I said that also, at that time, when people were under pressure, it worked in their favor. But we know now that it does not work in their favor. It should not have happened. And Professor Makhoba says, okay. Then you say, we should have said, we give you 10. We know you have a license. We have license for 25, but we know you are not experienced.
That's hindsight, yes.
That's hindsight. No,
That's hindsight.
it's fine. It's hindsight. We know that you are not out there on the ground.
Yeah.
So this is hindsight. This is what you found out with hindsight.
That's hindsight.
So then you go on under line 8. We are giving you 10. We will watch you over the period of time how you deal with this 10. Then Professor Makhoba says, well, which goes to your original strategy. We'll come back to that and debate the original strategy. Do you see that?
Yeah, I follow. I'm following you.
So, Precious Angels, for example, is licensed with no experience at all in this field. That much we know with hindsight. And licensed to take 150 patients. And you provide patients or transfer patients closer to that number. And these patients are mixed, not related to the license issued under her name. And this is what occurred. We must accept it.
Yes, yes, that's what
Okay.
it seems.
And is it lawful? Can you, may one under the Act, I'm sure there'll be many questions about that, issue a license on a speculative basis? I give you 150, one day it may be okay. May one do that?
In my opinion, no, you can't. We don't do that with private establishments. We don't do that with private
Yeah.
establishments.
And the risk lurking there is plain, doctor, is it not? If you say to somebody, I give you a license for 150, you literally, and in a category they know nothing about. You're inviting them to find fodder, isn't it?
Yeah.
To find people who generate
Income.
income.
Yes.
And that's your impression that the scheme went awry with numbers game, you call it, where people were given licenses and they were virtually encouraged to go and look or to take people
take.
from Esidimeni.
To take.
Yeah. And that would be a near perfect recipe
For things to go wrong, yes.
for things to go wrong, isn't it?
Perfect, I agree.
And that going wrong includes
Loss of life.
people dying
Loss
because
of
of that.
life,
Yeah.
yeah.
Counsel.
Thank you. Then, in the next page, on page 46, then you answer yes. You would have all learned lessons. That's Dr. Mahoba, that's Professor Mahoba. Then you, Dr. Selebano, we have learned in a better business way. I don't know what that means.
I can't see it nicely. Where is it?
At the
Page
top of the
46?
page, 46.
Okay. You know the people who said, yeah, is that the one?
Yes.
Which start, okay?
Yeah. Then in line 4, Professor Mahoba, yes. Then line 5, you say, Dr. Selebano, but when what happened? When the pressure was high, we'll come to this pressure. It seems to be your interview is replete with this pressure, but you somehow did not explain it properly. When what happened when the pressure was high? People just said, you know, you are licensed for 10, for 20, just take 20. And I think that put pressure on the ... and some of them could not even say no. I mean, which was unfortunate.
I can't
And
see where you are now. Is it page
46,
46?
46, page 46.
Yeah, my 46 is like...
The problem is that the numbering doesn't tie up. There's a different copy. Where the cross-examiner is leading from at the moment is line 20 on page 45. The witness is given line 20 on page 45. I don't know where we were reading from. Two different copies to the documents.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, Justice Msaneke. It was copied from the same printer. I don't know why it came out differently.
Well, shall we resolve that issue?
Yes,
It's a
we.
small matter, we ought to resolve it.
Yes,
We should work all from the same
copy.
copy. If there's an additional one, let it be given to the witness, please.
I've just marked. Oh yes, it's page 45 at the bottom of the page.
And as always, as I always urge, get the witness to the passage,
Yes.
and let's make sure we're on the right passage, and then the questions follow, not before. Very well. Where should
Then
we
we
look?
at the bottom, line 20,
Okay.
page 45. But then what happened when the pressure
Let's
was
just
high?
make sure the witness has got it.
Yes, I have it,
Yes.
Justice.
Okay,
I have it.
very well.
When the pressure was high, people just said, you know, you are licensed for 10, for 20, just take 20. And I think that put pressure on the ... And some of them could not even say no. I mean, which was unfortunate. We already have evidence. We don't want to repeat that from...
Let the witness answer.
yes.
You put the question. I mean, there must be some response to that, surely.
I don't know what's the question.
Yes. The question is, these NGOs were pressured to take patients.
The simpler question is, what did you mean here?
What did you mean?
These are his words. Then he can tell us what he meant.
Well, what I meant is that on hindsight, when this had happened, Justice, if you go back and relate it to what I said in terms of that people were licensed and it became a number game, if you then correlate it with this, you'll see what I'm meaning. To say that there's a time when now the number of patients were being increased unduly on NGOs. This is what I meant. The implementers at this time increased.
Where would the pressure have come from? From the implementers?
No, not from the implementers. You'll see somewhere, I've gone through it, you'll see somewhere that there was a change in plan as it went. There was a change in plan, and the numbers start upping very quickly. There was a change.
Yes, we know that, and we're going to come back to that. It's a big part of this case. But I mean, for NGOs, I want to follow your assessment. You've already told us it became a numbers game. Some NGOs took more people to make more money.
Some, yes.
Yes, some. I said some. Some, and so I'm asking you, how did it come about that they took more people?
Well, Justice, it would be difficult for me to know at that time. But what I'm saying is that once the ante was up and more patients were being moved out, there's a term you used to make an assessment to say most probably at that time when that ante increased, even those that were licensed for 10 or licensed for 20 but can only cope up with 10 because there must be staff.
No, but how did NGOs come to take more people?
They were given, I think, by the implementers.
They were given by the implementers.
Yeah. They were requested or given by the implementers to say, now take more.
I'm sure
That's
later
my
questions will come about the impact, the throttle impact of terminating the agreement. Now it's closing the back door. The only way is out. Would the implementers have had that kind of pressure? You must be out at a certain time out of life as Esidimeni.
Like any other plan, there would be some, that time frames and all that. I can just give an opinion.
No, but the termination would it put pressure on the implementers?
There was 6
to
months.
find more beds, to find more places for mental health care users.
But there was 6 months before the contract expired. There was 6 months.
So you mean what? You think they should have used the 6 months to do this properly?
Proper planning.
Is that what you're saying?
I should say in that 6 months, ordinarily you'd expect that proper planning, everything should have been done so that when that expires, then the phased approach comes in.
And did the implementers tell you that in May and June, they're going to push out so many people?
No, they didn't tell me. I wouldn't have met with them. They didn't tell me.
Do you know why they didn't tell you?
Most of them are, like I said, in terms of hierarchy, most of them are your assistant managers,
No, the
deputy
project team.
directors.
There was a project team, which was led by Mr. Musinochi, and the deputy project leader was Dr. Manamela. Didn't they report in regular meetings to you
With the-
and the MEC?
To the MEC, yes, they did.
Did they ever alert you that the throughput in May and June is going to be very high?
Not that I recall, not that I recall. I'm not, and I must say, I'm not saying they didn't. I don't want to blame them. I'm just saying I don't recall that level of discussion.
Yes. And I'm still interested in this pressure, Dr. Selebano. There was this pressure exerted on these NGOs to receive more patients. Where specifically did it come from within your department?
I should think it must have been from them. You mean the pressure to accept more patients?
Correct.
They were interacting with implementers, isn't it?
With the implementers?
Yes.
And who will be responsible for that, according to your view?
The implementers. I mean, you mean that you want a name?
Yes.
But
Would Dr. Manamela fit into that description?
As the leader of the team, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And throughout
But
the...
did she have an option? Once the contract is cancelled, she has to find beds, isn't it?
Correct.
For mental health care users. I see you nodding your head, Doctor. I want you to record your answer on the record.
Okay.
Once the contract had been cancelled on a 6-month notice, she had to find beds for mental health care users who were at Life Esidimeni.
That's correct.
Did she have an option but to find the beds? In other words, could she leave the patients at Life Esidimeni, for an example?
But the contract was being terminated, so she wouldn't.
Yeah. So as team leader, whatever she did, she had to find places for the mental health care users who were displaced from Life Esidimeni.
Who
Is
were
that fair to say that?
Who were being moved from Life Esidimeni. I would say, looking at the plan and everything, it's fair that she would have found the places. She had to find the places. It's part of that job.
It was part of her job to find the places.
To assist in the placement of patients. Let me put it that way.
Council.
Yeah. And seeing that there was this pressure coming from that angle as well, that the contract has been terminated, beds have to be found. Being the person who, according to your evidence, had decided that indeed the cancellation must go ahead, where did you think those beds were going to come from?
I don't understand your question.
Where did the extra beds to house these patients were supposed to come from?
The plan was to move the patients to the NGOs.
To the NGOs?
Yes.
That was the original plan?
That's the plan.
Okay. And then, is that the original plan which Professor Mahoba refers to in the passage I've referred you to?
Well, I don't know really what... I would have assumed that's what he meant.
Okay. What was the original plan? Let's go back to that now.
Well, it's to deinstitutionalize the patients. That was the original plan.
And how was the implementation going to be executed in relation to these NGOs?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, now you're asking at an operational level, what is it that was going to happen?
Yes.
I wouldn't know. I mean, patients move in Gauteng every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me get you back to the interview record. And let's go back to page 22. Are you on page 22?
22, sir.
Yeah, at the top there, you make reference to the fact that you say, no, the pressure on the staff became such that they, and I will take the sword for that, because you know, when you are not there for your staff and things go wrong, you cannot blame the staff. As the head of administration, I should take the responsibility, and that is why I say I will take the sword for them. Rather, they be saved. I can rather walk, because the pressure became so much on them that they, the odds intervenes. Then Professor Mahobas asks, the pressure came from whom? You answer in line 10, Dr. Selebano. Let us leave that, Professor. Let's deal with that.
Yeah, I don't know what you want me to say.
The pressure came from whom?
Well, it's known that we subsequently agreed with the prof that it was coming from the MEC, Mr. Katana Mahlangu.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think now we are having progress. And the pressure was that escalate the implementation of the programs. That is a project that is on NGO, place patients, whether there is space, whether they're capable of...
Shouldn't we ask the witness what was the pressure?
Okay. What was the pressure?
To place patients. That was the big pressure. Put the patients in the NGOs.
Where were these patients to be placed?
In the NGOs. I don't know. I hope I'm not trying, you know, I don't want to be misconstrued. The patients are going to be placed in the NGOs.
Correct.
Yes.
No, I just want to get that clear before
okay.
there's a debate. Then, on the same page...
But how was the pressure put on you?
Myself.
HOD, yes.
Now, I was not under pressure. You see, there were two parts. The first part was that there was the deinstitutionalization, and then subsequent to that, I learned later, then there was the marathon now. What inspired that, I'm not too sure also myself. But that on its own meant that it means it's a gallop to put patients in the NGOs. That is, the pressure started from saying patients need to be put in the NGOs.
But, Dr. Selebano, who made that decision? Who made the decision that there will be a marathon project that would gallop?
Honestly speaking, I knew only of the deinstitutionalization, the bigger project of the deinstitutionalization with the faces. The marathon part, I want, and that's my opinion, it must have been worked by the team that was implementing that. That's my opinion.
Can you tell us the facts, not less your opinion? Can you tell us who made the decision that led to you signing the termination agreement with Life Esidimeni on a 6-month notice? Who?
Okay,
In which position of authority made that decision?
No. But let me explain again, Judge. And please understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
There's a fiscal pressure. This doesn't apply to one aspect of the department. It applies across the board. The people who also feel the pressure every time would be the finance people, the budget people. So it's not like then it's only one person who said we must cancel the contract. There were other contracts. For instance, the Selby contract. That was also part of this. We started with the Selby project. So it was part and parcel of, we called it revenue enhancement, something like that. Yes.
But I'd like you to put faces to the decision making. There must have been a committee, there must have been people who made the decision, we are going to cancel the Life Esidimeni contract, which you implemented. You signed the termination letter. All I'm asking, Doctor, is, earlier you said the pressure came from the MEC. I want to understand the mechanics of what happened there. Who made the decision? HOD, we are cancelling.
No, but they're different, these are different things that we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, you say the pressure on the MEC in terms of putting patients in the NGO. It's a separate thing from discussing the contract, how it was terminated. What transpired was that the fiscus, and I want to go back again, there was fiscal pressure. And we all said, not only myself, the finance people, HR people, infrastructure people, we say, where do we cut? Where do we reduce the pressure on us? So that's why it's not easy for me to say all the chief directors were there, all the DDGs were there, all actually low-level staff, even of finance, they were all there. And we picked up, we put there and said, we might have to terminate this contract. We must look at Vodacom, how we're going to deal with Vodacom. All the idea was to reduce the fiscus pressure on the department. So it's not easy to say, I was in that meeting, it's not easy to say it was so and so. So it was it's the term that you may not like, it was a departmental discussion on how are we going to manage, because we were told that there's no new money. There's no money.
Who told you so?
The Treasury. It's national Treasury.
The provincial or national treasury?
National. I mean, let me rather explain again, because as the HOD, I sit with other HODs, with the DG, then we also look at the issues of, is there money, is there no money, how is the country going to manage with this? But the Treasury will say, I think you'd call it 10 by 10, and with the CF finance people, then the Treasury will say, the country doesn't have money, the country.
How did Life Esidimeni, how was it identified as an appropriate target for reducing expenditure?
I wouldn't say it was a target in that sense. I would say all the contracts were identified, all without fail. Many contracts that we have. Can we do this? Can we do that? And that's why I'm saying it was one of the contracts. It was not specifically targeted for any malicious intentions, no.
We'll come back to that. There are a lot of questions around there. The financials are also here, and I'm sure we'll go back and debate that issue. But we're talking about pressure. So what kind of pressure came from the MEC?
Well, the pressure was that the team must move to get NGOs having beds and patients being placed in the NGOs. I think that would be the pressure. And typically junior officials, once that thing has happened, they have to do it. They run.
Sure, she championed the notion that NGOs ought to be found and mental health care users must be placed in NGOs.
No, there have always been NGOs in the system.
No, in the Marathon Project. I'm talking about the Marathon Project.
Well, the managers
I'm
had...
trying to understand the pressure. Remember, that's where we are. You talked about the pressure from the MEC. So I'm trying to understand its character.
Yeah, it's a language issue sometimes when you say pressure. Okay, but let me try and put it this way, Justice. The contract is ending within a period of time. In fact, if I recall, it was supposed to end at the financial year, end of the financial year. There was a 2 months extension. I didn't do it myself, but there was a 2 months extension with Life Esidimeni. They were happy to have the 2 months extension themselves. I didn't do I only signed until the end of the financial year. So there was this extra extension, and I think that was where now, because they wouldn't, like you were saying, it was from behind, you must image that side. That was where then the pressure to place patients increased.
Yes. Would it be correct that the pressure which you refer to was also to the effect that, to the extent that you don't have existing NGOs, new NGOs must be established in order to house these patients?
You want to know whether it would be correct or not?
Yes.
Well, there were NGOs that were in existence,
Yes.
and the other NGOs were being formed. So I'm not too sure.
Let me put it differently.
Maybe put it differently.
Was the original plan not to use existing NGOs?
I don't recall saying we only use existing NGOs. I don't recall.
You don't recall
I
that?
don't recall.
Okay. I'll refer you to some passages from the documents. And let me refer you to file 3. It should be before you there.
Which one? So what do I do with this one? Okay.
Do we have file 3?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
In file 3 on page 1057.
1057. Okay, I've got it.
You are on page 1057.
1057.
Yeah. And
Is that the one on response to legislature question?
Correct. You are on the right one. Yes. That is the MEC's responses to the legislator. Do you recall this exercise by the MEC?
Do I what?
Do you recall this exercise by the MEC at the legislature, where she was called upon to answer certain questions on
Can
this?
I just read it so that I know what?
You don't have to read the entire document. I want to refer you to Roman figure 2.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yeah.
The question there is, what are the identified hospitals and or premises where they will be placed? Then the answer, bullet point 1, 2, 3. On 3, it's existing NGOs. Do you see that?
I see that.
And bullet point 2, it says unused part of the Tshwane District Hospital, Transvaal Memorial Institution, Pinar and Old Jameson Hospital. Bullet point 1, Westkopis Hospital, Sterkfontein Hospital, and Cullinan Care.
Right.
So it will appear to me that this was the plan. And that accorded to the presentation made by Dr. Manamela from the evidence we have had so far.
Well, I don't know, but here she was responding to a question. That's what I would say. She was responding to the question, what are the hospitals? I'll give you an example, for instance. Unused part of Tshwane District Hospital, it was never used. I'll give you another example. TMI, it was never used. Yeah.
No. Let's not lose focus on this pressure. I want to find out whether this pressure was to the effect that you must find new NGOs so that we can house all of these patients. Because from there, the answer seems to suggest that the the plan was to use existing NGOs. And I'll refer you now to another volume where that specific point was dealt with by Dr. Manamela.
Well, let's find out from the witness, was that the plan?
Was that the plan?
No, I don't know of any plan where specifically it was said, look for new NGOs. I don't know of that plan.
Well, if that is the answer, then council refers you to page 1057, where the legislature was told that is the plan. That is the cutting end. That's the thrust of the question.
Yeah, but I'm sure, Justice, you agree. I wouldn't say I know it if I don't know it.
Now, don't say you should say you know
Okay.
it. We just want a response from you.
Yeah. No,
Was that the plan? So your answer is, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know of any plan
When
that
you
said.
terminated the contract, where did you think these patients would go to?
The plan was to take patients, the concept of deinstitutionalization was to take patients to the NGOs which are in communities. That's the high level, what that I can tell you.
And a presentation is made to you by Dr. Manamela on the implementation plan. Isn't it so?
Yes,
Yes.
not to me alone, to
No, I
management,
understand that.
right?
Understand that.
Okay,
But you were in a meeting, the evidence goes,
okay,
and we've shown you quite early, council showed you the plan,
yes.
which was presented by Dr. Manamela. Beyond the high level, from her plan, what did you gather to be the destination of these patients?
NGOs.
Which NGOs?
Like I say, I wouldn't be able to say this one, because that's not where, I said, and I'm not saying anything in a funny way. This is not where I would ask the micro details, which NGO, how many beds, how many this. You can't do that.
As a bare minimum, would you have required that the NGOs be licensed?
They should be the right licensed, certificated NGOs, yes.
And they should be NGOs selected in accordance with the Mental Health Care Act?
That's right, that's right.
At a bare minimum, they must
Bare
accord
minimum.
with the requirements,
Bare minimum,
prescripts of the law.
bare minimum, yes.
3, you told us they must be fit for purpose. Is that correct?
That
They must
was-
be able to do, I'm sorry, you say?
That was my discussion with the ombuds, and I said it should be a fit for purpose. It's a concept that applies across the board in anything.
And when the presentation was made to you about the destination of these patients, were you happy with the plan?
I mean, Justice, why would I be unhappy with a plan that's still going to be implemented? I was not unhappy with the plan.
And if you were unhappy, you had the power to stop it, did you?
I think, yes, if I can't approve something that I'm unhappy with.
Okay. Just to move off from this point, the presentation by Dr. Manamela is on volume 7, page 2661.
Should I put this one there? Page 2661.
That's correct, but the document starts at 2658. Perhaps start at 2658.
58, okay.
Are you familiar with that document?
Required. Yeah, it's 2015, really. I'll struggle to say whether I'm familiar with it or not. It's
Yes.
2015. There are many documents in the department, many.
Okay, no, it's fine. Dr. Manamela had already testified about this document. It's a department's document.
Okay.
You don't have to
Belongs
worry.
to-
Yeah,
yes, it
no,
belongs
you
to
don't
the
have to worry about
department.
that.
Yeah.
And this, she said, it's a presentation that is on the project she had made, project plan, and on page 2661, she refers to option 1.
Okay.
Then the first bullet point, beds identified in listed below hospitals and COs and infrastructure units submitted. The estimates, the requirements for renovations, HR and the budgets thereof. Bullet point 2, other beds were identified.
Just before we delve into detail, I think it's fair to tell the witness whether this was presented at the meeting where he was present.
Okay. Dr. Selebano, I have asked whether are you familiar with this document. We had referred to it that it's a 2015 document and so on.
Yeah.
Are you aware of a meeting you had attended where such a document was presented, where you were present?
I wouldn't recall. It's possible that I was present.
It's possible.
It's
And you can
possible.
put it to the
I wouldn't-
witness. Dr.
I wouldn't-
Manamela says the witness was present.
Yes. Dr. Manamela said that one of the leaders for the department, you were present.
Yeah.
You accept that?
It's possible, yeah.
Okay. Then let's go to 2661.
Two six
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, the
Okay.
second bullet point now. It says other beds were identified to manage acute users to relieve psychiatric hospitals' high number of referrals. Then the last bullet point, the 3 psychiatric hospitals and existing NGOs will take the bulk of mental health care users, while the other hospital will increase or open acute services. The other users had to be discharged to home. Do you recall this?
I can just read it now. I understand, yeah. But like I said, I don't recall. But I'm not denying that I was in this meeting. I don't remember.
And that it was impressed upon you that the existing NGOs will take the bulk of the patients.
I'm not too sure what you want me to say now. I don't understand.
Well, the question is, it was always part of the plan that existing NGOs, not new ones, would take the bulk of the mental health care users. What is your response to that?
I wouldn't argue with that. I wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah, it's in the presentation.
Yeah,
and
it's in the
put to you
I wouldn't
that
I
was
wouldn't
the
argue
plan.
that. Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that.
So, in relation to this pressure, would it be reasonable to conclude or infer that this pressure resulted in the implementers as well deciding on or in opening new NGOs in order to take on these new patients, which existing NGOs can't take?
You want me to make an inference?
Yes.
Yeah, reasonably. Yeah.
What happened to the, just go to pages 262, 2662.
2662.
That relates to numbers, that relates to money.
Come again,
Starting
Justice?
from the HR requirements of Vescopi's hospital. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see that.
Thank you. If you page over, again, it's costs of Vescopi's HR requirement.
Okay,
Then the Sterkfontein ones.
which are required.
Let's page
yes.
over, Kalinen HR required. And the total budget needed for that is put on there. And then comes the section on renovations. 2665. Can you see that?
265.
In the presentation.
Beds identified, other hospitals, estimate for renovations. Okay, I can see
Can you
that.
see that?
Yeah.
Part of the plan was that if renovated, there will be 974 beds. Can you see that?
Right.
With a total staff head count of 243. And then they give you the estimates of each of the hospitals in relation to renovations and HR. Were those renovations ever done?
No, they were not done.
They were not done.
No, it was difficult. Yeah, they were not done. There was no money to do this.
So these are just numbers. There was no money
He was-
to do this.
I think she was making this 2015. If I'm to place this correctly, this is 2015, and she must come up as the leader in the mental health. Come up, give us a plan. How are you going to do this? If I was placed in this meeting, then we'd say, this is how we're going to do it. HR, this, and that, and that. And that's why I explained to you, Judge, that when you say, point out who said you must sign, I say, it was a team. It's obvious from me when I see this that the HR people were in this meeting, the infrastructure people were in the meeting, and the finance people were in this meeting. So this was a plan that was given to the department.
So if there was no plan to renovate and create new beds, look at page 2667.
267.
The beds would have had to come from NGOs.
I'm not following you nicely.
Okay, let's try again.
Unused buildings. That's
We
where
know
you are.
that there was no money for renovations. This was a plan up in the cloud.
Not really.
It must follow. But looking at 2667, the conclusion.
667.
Yes, 2667. It must follow that the beds had to come from NGOs.
So you're saying if we couldn't renovate, then obviously then we had to get beds from NGOs.
Yes.
Yes.
And when the presentation was made to you, that must have been quite plain, Doctor.
Quite what?
It must have been quite obvious.
No. This is,
You renovate, or else you're going to take these patients from Esidimeni to NGOs.
But-
I'm just asking on this presentation, was it obvious to you that you'll end up with NGOs?
no, it wouldn't be that obvious. This is 2015. The movement of patients were around 2016. So if it would have been unthinkable that there could be a plan and don't put money. Manamela, when she was doing this, she wouldn't worry whether is there money or not to renovate. Her job would be to sit with a team and say, these are the estimates that we are going to do. HR, this and this and that. And that level of understanding then would come from myself and the CFO to say, no matter how much we may wish to do certain things, some things may not be able to be done now. So it wouldn't be that obvious, like you are putting it.
Well, you told us there was no money and renovations were not going to be done.
The renovations, the other way around, renovations were not done because there was no money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same equation, Doctor.
No.
But then the narrow question is, was it obvious that all these patients will have to go to NGOs? Unless you renovated old hospitals, unless you increased capacity at Vescopis, Cullinan, and Sterkfontein, you had to resort to NGOs.
It's fair, yeah,
And it was plain from the plan.
fair.
Took time to get there, Doctor.
No.
Yeah, let's help each other. Let's try and be efficient, save time.
No,
also-
but I'm sure with due respect, and I respect you a lot, I need to also to understand exactly what is the question so that I can answer it properly.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you. And in fact, the evidence we have from Dr. Manamela was that these planned renovations did not work. Does that accord with your knowledge as well?
Yeah, no, it's true. They were not done.
So the planned 1,164 beds, if renovations were to be done, would not be available if that is the case.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how much the renovations would absorb, unless I read.
According to the plan, it says if renovations, then this is the figure.
Yeah, then it stands to reason that
It stands to
if
reason
it was
that.
not done.
Yeah, thank you. And are you aware of an invitation which was sent out to NGOs in an email sent by Hannah Jacobs, dated 9 November 2015?
No, not aware of any email. I wouldn't know about it.
You would know? Okay.
I actually knew Hannah after. I never knew her before.
Oh, you never knew Hannah before? Before when? Specifically?
I never knew Hannah before.
9 November what?
I don't know why you say 9 November.
No. I'm trying to understand the before and after.
No, I never knew Hannah. You are saying, am I aware? I'm saying I wouldn't have known, I've been aware because I never knew her personally until after the post facto.
Oh, I see, understand. Thank you, sorry. And in this meeting, one of the attendees was an owner of an NGO called Anchor House or Anchor Home, Dorothy Franks.
I don't know her.
At the time, she worked as a credit control clerk for another NGO. And she came out of the meeting with an advice that she can go and form an NGO because there's a need for NGOs by the department. Are you aware of this?
No, I'm not aware of that. I didn't attend that meeting. I don't know who's, you mentioned the name. I don't know that person.
Okay.
I wouldn't have known.
Okay. But to you, does that sound right that people should be invited at that late stage? 9 November 2015, we had already issued out a notice to council on 29 November 2015 to form new NGOs.
Like you say, does it sound right? No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. Then let's move on. Let me take you back to the page 22 of the record of the proceedings or interview.
I hope it's this one. Okay. Is it the one that starts with no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Then in line 12 on page 22, the pressure was so high that in the process, I think errors were made where we had agreed on 20 patients, hold on to 15, let us see how you cope. Then you end up increasing and increasing and increasing. What did you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
This was, I was responding to the question I said. And remember we spoke about the pressure to place patients.
Yes.
So this is exactly what it means, that I think, you must read it, I think errors were made where we had agreed on 20 patients. Remember I did say to you that some NGOs could only take 10, and that's what I'm saying, that instead of 10 now, it actually ended up not being 10, being more than that. That's what I meant.
Then further down there, Professor Makhoba says increasing. Then you say, yeah, I think that is where the error started.
I think, yes.
Then he goes on. Okay, line 21, Dr. Barney Selebano, that's important as well. Why would that error happen? That is you asking the question. It is because now these are new NGOs. Not necessarily new people whom you have to manage these types of patients you are adding. You see, the skill for psychiatric patient is an defined skill. I will not say you just need to have good hearts to deal with. Be patient with this type of patients, but sometimes you need slightly more than that to recognize where this guy is ill, when this guy is ill, and all that. You see that?
Yeah, I see that.
So, what do you mean by this?
By what you need to tell me what
Your
so that I can
statement
answer.
that why will that error me? It is because now you are these are new NGOs. Why was it important for you to emphasize that point, that these are new NGOs?
Okay. If you remember what I said, I think, and then the new NGOs, my assumption, my opinion was that once you now have new NGOs, if you read it with the right context here, you'll see that I said, you have a new NGO, and now it's new, you're bringing in people, they might have good hearts, like I said.
Yes.
But you need more than that. It's a new NGO. You need more than a good heart. You need a guy or a caretaker who will understand that type of patient, whether how ill is this patient, because you see, it's not easy for, let's say, a patient who can't talk due to a mental issue.
Yes.
The patient will not say, I've got a pain here.
Correct.
But you need somebody then who will be able, out of experience, to say, I think this patient is not well. That's what I meant.
Oh, I see. And that is why you make a specific reference there. You see, the skill for psychiatric patient is an undefined skill. Is that what you're trying to
In
explain?
particular, I was referring to the fact that here you didn't have a specialist psychiatric nurse. That's what I meant. That so you'd want somebody who has been working with psychiatric patients and knows how to relate to them, how to take care of them, how to pick up issues with them. That's what I meant.
And that bit, the Mental Health Care Directorate would have known. At a bare minimum, they would have known that.
You see, if you don't tick boxes, you would know.
You would know.
You would know.
You would know, yes.
You would know.
I mean, that's their core function. They're a mental health care directorate.
Yeah.
They
Their
would
core
have,
business.
They would have known what you've just told us, which is quite helpful, Doctor.
I would expect that they should
Yes.
know.
And that, with that knowledge, they would place patients in full cognizance of these requirements you've just described.
Appropriately, yes.
Is it fair, with what you know now, that exact science, hindsight, is it fair to say that the directorate did not do that? In most NGOs, I know you're going to tell me not all,
Yes, I
in
mean,
most NGOs, we can start with precious angels.
I wouldn't say, well, your question is it fair? But not all NGOs, I suppose.
No, not all. Look, people died at specific NGOs.
Yeah,
I'm sure council
mainly.
will take you to those details.
Yeah,
We
mainly,
have a
yeah.
lot of detail
Yeah.
of who died where, when, and how long they had been there. We have all those facts very well marshaled. So I'm saying to you, on hindsight, to HOD, you look back and say, did the Mental Health Care Directorate follow these precautions when they placed mental health care users at NGOs?
Yeah, I agree with you.
You agree that they did not,
They should have followed that.
but did they?
It's
It's a matter of hindsight.
Well, with hindsight and with what transpired, you are pressed to say, no, they didn't, but you can never say that as a fact. But,
Oh, you can.
well,
Many of the people under your care died. You can't say it as a fact. Can't you?
Well, for now, for this purpose, I'll say yes, but we can discuss. Yes, I can.
We still hope that somebody under your command, starting with you, will come and tell us what happened. It's a very important part of healing, Dr. Selebano. Just to tell us what happened, we know because we observe, sometimes we know out of hindsight,
Yes,
we know out of inferences.
yes.
All these are ways of gathering knowledge and
Information.
facts.
Yes, yes.
So you are a very vital part of this because you're the man who signed off on the plan.
That's right.
As you sit there, do you think these NGOs where mental health care users in the Marathon Project died were fit for purpose?
No, I wouldn't say they were. No, they were not. No, no.
Continue.
Thank you. And with this in mind now, that these new NGOs, these new people you refer to, might not, and as a matter of fact, we know now that they did not have the skill to look after these patients. Was the move to these particular NGOs to the interest of these patients or not, in your view?
Come again?
Was this transfer of patients to these NGOs who had no skills and no experience at all in taking care of mental healthcare users, was it to their benefit or not?
The benefit of the patients.
Yes.
You mean this particular NGOs?
Correct.
Yes, it was not.
It was not. In what way was it not to the benefit of the user?
I mean, we have just said it, that they should have been skilled and been able to pick up issues that patients would have. If they can't do that, it can be in their benefit.
To what dangers or possible dangers were these patients exposed to by placing them under the care of these NGOs, in your view?
Like I said, if the patient is ill and you are not skilled to pick up that this patient is ill, you're putting that patient in danger. That's it. I'm sure they could wash the patients.
They could what?
Wash the patients.
Wash the patients.
Yes.
And what are the dangers?
No, I don't know what more dangers do you want. I gave you what is more paramount for me. If they're unable to pick up that this patient is sick outside the chronic condition,
Yes.
if you can't pick up just that, then you're putting this patient in danger.
So they may not know when and how to intervene with administering medication to this particular patient.
If it's, I'm just giving you what I know, my experience. If it's a chronic medication, people at home administer medication. You don't need any experience. If it's hypertensive drugs, you just take it. So if you say they don't know to do that, then they're even more dangerous to the patients.
And then let's go further and identify the second problem out of this pressure that you had identified, that is in your evidence. No, in your interview. On page 23.
Right?
And on page 23, in the that is under line 10.
10.
Yes. Before we get to line 10, let's start, just complete that for record purposes. I think your answers are important for the record. Under line 6, you say, and it can be slightly difficult if you do not have experience. That is, you refer to the NGO. No, I'm sorry, it's 23, line 4, I'm sorry.
23, line 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can be slightly difficult if you do not have experience. Who are you referring to there?
It's the same discussion that if you take somebody who doesn't have an experience of taking care of a particular type of patient, it can be slightly more than that to recognize when this guy is ill or not. That is, it goes with that. That if you take this guy, he doesn't have experience, then it's a problem. I don't know what.
And by problem, you mean it
Maybe I'm
would
using
pose a risk to the
to
mental
the
health care
patient.
user?
To the patient, yes.
Yes.
Sorry to use the word.
No, that's
is,
not.
yeah.
That's fine.
Yes. And let's get to the second error. Out of this pressure, and
Where are we now?
now on the same page,
23.
yes, line 11.
Okay.
Then you say, and I think that is where the error started. The second error, I will want to say that the haste in moving the patients, we would have, some of us cautioned against this, against haste. The haste was too much. You could have done it in a phased way. You had already referred to the fact that your view was that it ought to have been phased in. And what do you mean by this?
Yes, what you meant here.
Yes, what do you mean by this, the second error?
The haste, I mean, patients were moved very quickly. That's what I meant. Without, it's also hindsight also that you move patients quickly, the preparations, and I'm saying this, Judge, because now I know that patients moved fast, but the preparations were not up to scratch. I now know that. But that time, honestly speaking, at that time, I didn't know that. I didn't know. But now we know that patients were moved very quickly. I've seen a graph where it shows that about 900 or so patients were moved very quickly. And that's agreeable. And if you add the fact that even some of the NGOs were new, and some of new as they are, they didn't have the requisite skills, that's what I meant, that became the error.
And doctor, you didn't pay them
They were not,
4 months.
they were not paid for 4 months. I
note-
wouldn't know 4 months, but I know that they were not even paid. I don't know how long,
On
but
that
it was
note
terrible.
of potential hunger, we should adjourn. Because patients at an NGO with no resources for 4 months, it's reasonable to infer they must have been very hungry.
Terrible.
Terrible, you say. Let's not be terrible to ourselves. We're going to have the lunch break now.
Okay,
And we ask you to be back here at 2:30. It's 1:30 now.
okay.
We are adjourned.